Hello everyone. There was a projector thing up here which said the title of the talk was "Does my bomb look big in this?" So just to let you know, that was sort of the tone of the discussion. This that I'm wearing, I'm sure most of you know, it's a headscarf, otherwise known as a hijab. And this particular one that I'm wearing today, I wore deliberately because it's actually a revolutionary hijab. It's from Egypt's Tahrir Square, before the revolution, pre-revolution, so I knew something was going on, so I bought one before then. And no, so my bomb's not big in this at all. It's a very peaceful hijab, but it's a revolutionary hijab, so if anyone tries to mess with me, I'll be biting back. And no, this is not a detonator, just to make you all feel reassured. It's actually a microphone. And the other thing I wanted to clear up is my name. My name is not a swear word in German. I mean, we're friends here, so I thought I should clear that up for you. My name is Shaista, and my name comes from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, all of Tony Blair's favourite holiday hotspots. But my name actually means wisdom in Urdu and Farsi, so I just thought I should explain that to all of you before I continue. So thank you very much for the introduction. As my friend here has explained to you, I am a stand-up comedian. It's a very logical thing for me to be, obviously. I started stand-up comedy a year ago. You can tell by my accent I'm not from here. I'm adopted to the north, and I love it here. It's definitely one of the best places I've lived in. I decided to the reason why I got into stand-up comedy is because 2 years ago I was living in London with my husband, who is an Iraqi, and he said we need to move out of London because basically before our country liberated his country, he was the head of junior doctors in Iraq, and he had to flee along with about 12,000 doctors over a period of 5 years because they all became targets for Al-Qaeda, for militia, for American soldiers, because doctors are very intelligent, highly educated, so they were able to speak to the outside world and explain in great detail what was happening and still is happening. So they all became targets for lots of different groups. So he had to flee along with, as I said, 12,000 doctors and health workers. So the reason why I'm telling you this is because when he came to the UK, he had to requalify as a doctor. And so when he got his career back on track, he was offered a job in Preston. So obviously we decided that we needed to go, we needed to pack up and go. So I thought, great, that's fine, but what am I going to do? I've always been a very busy person, and I thought I have no idea what I'm going to do in Preston. I don't know anybody here, all my family are in the south. So I thought I'll go and do a stand-up comedy course. It was something I always wanted to do, but my life has been very busy, and I just thought I'm just going to do it. So I enrolled on a course in Liverpool, logically, home of comedy, and it was a 6-week course. It was the best thing I ever did in my life. There were 10 of us in the class, 2 women, and as usual, I was the only ethnic, right, used to that. And when I walked in the room, everyone looked quite shell-shocked in a nice way. And then we went around the room. It was a bit like Alcohol Anonymous. Not that I've ever been there, obviously, right? And so, you know, who you are and what you do. And they were all really gagging to hear why I was there, but in a nice way. And so they were like, all right, okay, nice. You know, so it was really good. And it was the best thing I did. And then after 6 weeks, we had our first performance at the Royal Court in Liverpool. And I was really overwhelmed at the reaction from people. Now, I don't walk around in my life thinking I'm different to everyone else. I'm me. I'm not trying to make any political statements or trying to shock people. I'm not interested in being, developing my comedy career because I wear a scarf. I'm just me. And I was saying earlier on that I was very surprised at the reaction from people. And in the past year since I've been doing stand-up comedy, the biggest thing that I've learned is that despite our country being very multicultural, people don't talk to each other. There's still a fear, there's a barrier. In the north of the country, I've realised in this country that there are a lot of segregation. In the south, it's not as segregated. And these things actually really surprised me because I've lived here all my life, I'm from here, but I didn't recognise that as being the UK. So it's been a really interesting journey for me as well. And the other thing to say is, without fail, when I'm in a comedy club anywhere in the country, I'm usually the only non-white person, apart from the security guard. And that's not a joke, that's a fact. And the security guard at the Frog and Bucket always high-fives me whenever he sees me, and he always says, "Are you on tonight, love?" Without fail. I'm like, "No, mate, I've just come to watch the comedy." And so does the chap at the comedy store, and I've always find this really amusing. And the reaction to me rocking up on stage is shock and awe, minus the carpet bombing. People are always, it just goes really quiet. They're like, what? You know? It's not a hostile reaction, it's just a reaction I always get. And that's actually for my fellow stand-ups, because there's very little diversity even on the comedy circuit among comedians themselves. And I found all of this really testing and very challenging, and to be honest with you, it's actually put me off sometimes. Sometimes it knocked some of my confidence, because I'm not a novelty, I'm a human being, I am who I am. I'm a Muslim, I'm British, I'm a woman, I like football, I like cooking, I like traveling. There are many things about me, I am many things. I'm not just a Muslim, but that's the first thing people see. So I use that and I turn it on its head. And I think it was last Friday or the Friday before, because my memory fails me, when we had this horrific attacks in Oslo. Absolutely horrific. All those children mowed down, killed by a white, blonde-haired, blue-eyed terrorist. He is a terrorist. He's ideologically driven, he's politically motivated, and he killed those children, he killed those people. But what I found very interesting was the media in our country was struggling to call him a terrorist. And as soon as those attacks happened, my heart sank, because I knew what was going to happen, and it started happening immediately. And one thing that you probably don't know about is about 10 past 1 in the morning, after the attacks, in our own country, in Luton, a mosque was attacked. Swastika signs were sprayed on a mosque in Luton. And the police have said that they believe this attack was racially motivated. So the reason why I'm telling you that is because the backlash was immediate. And we had 8 hours of vile, Islamophobic, racist commentary from every single news channel in this country. And I had to switch it off because I couldn't take anymore. And for me, I'm very concerned about this, because I think this is worse than September the 11th, because this is now 10 years on from September the 11th, a decade on from the terrorist attacks in New York, from the so-called war on terror, from Abu Ghraib, from Guantanamo, and yet we still had this vile nonsense and hate-filled nonsense. And that is the reality of what we're living with at the moment in this country. And so that was something I wanted to talk about, because it does actually reflect my comedy, because like I said to you earlier on, I thought this country was very multicultural and diverse, but I realised through my comedy that it's not. As a journalist, when I worked for the BBC for 5 years in London as a producer for BBC News, and I knew, I was the only ethnic, one of the very few ethnics there, one of the very few, well, the only as far as I can remember, hijabi, etc. But I got on with my job. But I found it very difficult being there, because it's hard sometimes if you're the only person that's visibly different, or that doesn't necessarily on the surface look like everyone else. But when you get to know people, you find out that they hold the same values as you, they believe in the same things as you. So that's really, that experience of being a journalist and working in the newsroom at that time, after September the 11th, it was horrendous, it was horrific, and it really affected me very personally. And actually, I was developing some new material around what's happened around Oslo, not around the horrific events, obviously, but around the reaction to what's happened in Oslo. And I remember after September the 11th, literally the day after, my father, he came to this country when he was 16 from Pakistan. He was a very brave young boy. He came here, he had the opportunity to come here. He's worked hard all his life, he's contributed massively. I'm very proud of him. He's a community worker. He's gone to Buckingham Palace and received an award from the Queen and all the rest of it. He's a very humble man, and he's very much committed to reaching out to people. But the day after September the 11th, he was on his way to the mosque, and he's, like I said, he's been here since he was 16. He's more British than he is Pakistani. Anyway, he was called a Taliban bastard by someone in our community. And I remember that was a very difficult experience for us, because as his children, we felt very protective of him, but actually he's our father and he wants to protect us. So he felt very sad that the sort of role was changing. Anyway, it's all getting a bit heavy now, so I shall try and move on a little bit more. After my experience of working for the BBC, after the launch of the war on terror on Afghanistan, I just thought, look, frankly, I'm done with this, so I need to move on. So I did. I did a master's in refugee studies, and then I went to work for Al Jazeera in Doha, which was a very interesting experience. It was just as we launched our liberation attempts to liberate the Iraqis, so it was just around about that time. So I worked there for a while, and then I came back to the UK, and I basically got a job with Oxfam I worked in their press office, and then they sent me off to, they basically made me into the Kate AD of Oxfam, which basically means I was sent to all the conflict zones and the emergency zones in the world. And it sort of happened very randomly by accident. The first time they sent me was after the tsunami, which was I think now 6 years ago this year. I was actually traveling around Brazil, and the tsunami happened. So I rang the office in Oxford and said, look, I want to come back. And they were like, oh, just enjoy your holiday, it's all right. I was like, no, really, I can't enjoy my holiday. I said, I need to come back. And so I came back, and I worked for a week, and it was absolutely insane. We had everybody and anybody, the whole wide world. It was the first time something like this had ever really happened. It's, you know, in terms of the modern media age, so we were able to see everything. And I remember the first thing that really struck me, and the reason why I wanted to come back, was because all I kept seeing in Brazil on international TV channels was lots and lots of brown people wailing and screaming, but you never heard them. You never heard their names, you never heard their stories. What we did hear was the names of white European tourists and international tourists in Thailand. We heard their names, we knew where they were from, we heard their stories, we heard who they lost. But everyone else was just a mass of people just thumping the ground and wailing and screaming, and I just thought, there's something not right here. So after a week of working like a complete lunatic, my boss put me on a flight and sent me off to Indonesia, to Aceh, which I believe I'm right in saying 67,000 people died in Aceh. And it was actually the place that was the worst hit by the tsunami. But because of the fact that it was so far away, and because at the time there was an insurgency going on there's a lot of political upheaval, nobody could actually ever access that area. So it was the first time that journalists were ever really allowed into the area, and outsiders were allowed into the area. So I arrived there 6 days after it happened, and to be honest, you can't prepare yourself for that. I mean, my boss, he's very gung-ho, bless his cotton socks. Now, I've travelled a lot, I'd worked in Gaza and stuff, and he said to me, you'll be all right, you've seen dead bodies, off you go. So that was basically his preparation for me. I was like, thanks very much, mate. So I arrived at Singapore airport, and it was only then that it really hit me about where I was going, because they had the Prime Minister of Singapore on CNN. And it was the first time that I kind of was really engaging with the news because I was too busy working. And he said, it looks like a scene out of Hiroshima. Those were his words, and I remember them very vividly. And I thought, okay. So anyway, the first time that I had to use humour in Indonesia was actually to get to Aceh. So Banda Aceh has been very heavily devastated. And I arrived in Indonesia, and I had to go, basically I was told by my boss, you need to get yourself to Banda Aceh however you see fit. I was like, fantastic, I've never been to Indonesia, I don't know Indonesia. So I ended up at a military air base with 4 other colleagues, and the first person that I saw was a US soldier, and when he saw me, he looked really confused because I don't look Indonesian, right? And I had a very bright hijab on and everything, and he was like, so he was very polite, he came up to me, he's like, hello ma'am, and all that stuff, and I was like, hello. And he said to me, where are you from? And I really just wanted to say Iraq so that we'd all have to hit the deck, but I didn't. My colleagues were looking at me saying, don't go there, right? So I didn't. I was like, Oxford, right? He was like, Oxford? Anyway, so we had a little bit of a chin wag, right? So anyway, we bonded and all that, and he told me that he was going to try and get me on this massive military plane, this cargo plane, get us all on there, get us to Aceh. Anyway, we were there for like 8 hours. We didn't get on the plane because this is a true story, it's a fact, this is not comedy, sadly. The Americans had hit a cow on the runway at Banda Aceh, so they closed the airport. It's a good job it wasn't India because it would have just caused a mass riot. So we have to thank God for that. So anyway, so I wasn't able to travel on that blasted airplane, and to be honest, I was quite happy about it because it was humongous, and I felt it was a bit wrong for an aid worker to be on a military aircraft. I didn't think that was right. Anyway, principles sometimes get in the way, right? So anyway, the following day, I managed to get on a commercial airliner because my colleague, Larry Blackstock, lovely black guy, dreadlocks, right? He managed to get on a plane before me, and he gave me his boarding pass. So the Indonesians couldn't care if I was black, white, green, yellow. They were like, if you want to go there, you go there, love. So anyway, it was really humbling because obviously there's a lot of death and horror there, but people, they still maintain their sense of humour. And this is the thing that I've learned, that was the thing that gave me a lot of strength. Like, going to these places and just being witness to horror and conflict. I'm lucky I can get on the plane and come back, right? Obviously people live there every day, but it's the humour and it's the joy of people that kind of just raises your spirit. Now, I was in Lebanon when Lebanon was being bombed by the Israeli army in 2000, and I think it was again about 6-7 years ago. And the first thing I remember is I've been sent there to go and gather stories about people whose houses have been bombed and, you know, kids who don't have any food and all that. But all I could do when I was going to meet these people was I was too busy looking at them because they were the sharpest dressed people I've ever met in my life. Now, if anyone's been to Lebanon, you'll know that we all look like tramps, all of us, right? They can tell that we're British or we're foreigners. They all look bloody immaculate. They've all got the best noses in the world because they've got the same plastic surgeon. This is a fact. And they're all really well turned out. So I'm looking at these women, and all I want to say to them, where did you get your eyebrows done? Where did you know, and they're all looking really well turned out, and it was just so funny. And it's those sorts of things that you remember, that people have the best sense of humour. And, you know, we're not used to these things happening, so we don't always know how to deal with them. But they're just cracking jokes, slapping each other on the back, and, you know, then you have to pull yourself together. Now, as I said to you earlier on, my husband is Iraqi, and I went to Baghdad 4 years ago, just after Saddam Hussein had been executed. So my husband said, do you want to go to Iraq? As one does, he knows how to show me a good time. So obviously, I said, oh yeah, why not, right? Actually, we had to go for family reasons. I won't bore you with that, right? But anyway, he said to me, your Arabic isn't particularly great. I said, yeah, that's because you haven't bothered to teach me any, right? He said, I need you to wear something when you go. I thought, what's going on here? This conversation's turning a bit kinky. What's going on? Anyway, he gave me a niqab, a face veil. I was like, what's this? He said to me, you need to put that on. And he said to me, because he said, you're an outsider. And he said, if anybody finds out you're an outsider, your life is in danger. I said, right. And then so I put it on, and I think it was the first time in his life he thought, yes, I've got this woman, right? And he said to me, he said, listen, he said, the other thing is, he said, there's etiquette involved in wearing that. He said, you can't talk to me unnecessarily. I was like, oh. And he said to me, you need to just keep really quiet. He said, do you think you can manage that? I was like, well, if it's Al-Qaeda or my life, give me my life every time. Anyway, we drove, this is a very insane thing to do, but it was the only way to get there at the time. We drove from Jordan to the border of Iraq, which took about 4 or 5 hours. So we get there in the early hours of the morning, and at the border crossing, the guy who's running the border crossing clearly is a very powerful man, right? And he wants to lord his power over us, right? So he looks at my husband's passport. He's an Iraqi, no one cares, that's fine, right? Looks at my passport, British passport, oh, okay. So obviously I've got my face veil on, right? So he says to my husband in Arabic, I need to see your wife's face. Right, now this is a very big deal in the Arab world, right? It's a very big deal. You don't look at people's wives' faces. So my husband went off into one. Over my dead body will you be seeing her face, rant, rave. So I'm just standing there in the corner thinking, hello, you're in character, I'm in character, we are in character, right? So he's like properly kicking off. So I summoned him. I said, what the hell is going on? He said, that bastard wants to see your face. I want to see his mother's face. I was like, all right. So I said, look, I'm really sorry to break this to you, right? But I said, this is an act, right? I said, this is not real. And I said, it's dawn. I said, in a few hours, right, all the nutters are going to be out on the roads of Baghdad. I said, I want to get there. So I said, get out of my way. And he said, where are you going? I said, I'm going to show him my mug. I'm showing him my face, and we're moving on. So I went up there. I lifted my veil up, showed him my face. He was like, and he threw my passport back at me, and he was looking at my husband going, right? So all the journey from the border crossing to Baghdad, my husband didn't speak to me. He was in a proper strop. My honour has been destroyed. You've ruined my honour. I was like, whatever, okay? So we managed to arrive there in one piece. It was on the road to Baghdad when I realised that not only am I a lunatic for being here, but my family are lunatics, because I said to my mother and father, I need to go to Baghdad. They were like, yeah, that's fine. I said, your only daughter wants to go to the world's worst horrific conflict. They were like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine, off you go. They said to me, other people's kids live there, other people's children live there, people have children. He said, go. I was like, great. So anyway, we arrived in Baghdad after a lot of drama and horror, which I won't bore you with now on the road, where I nearly died. But I was in character, remember, so I wasn't allowed to speak. So I had to keep my mouth closed, which is a bit tricky for me. Anyway, we arrived in Baghdad, and God bless him, my father-in-law took one look at me and he went ballistic. And this is what I thought was so funny. He said to me, what the hell are you wearing that thing for? Why are you wearing that thing? And he said, my son's a fanatic. And he grabbed hold of my husband by the neck and he pinned him up against the wall. He said, what the hell have you done to her? And this is the first time I've met him. I spoke to him on the phone lots, and I was like, no, you don't understand. I said, this is protection. And he spent one whole week, every day, for 1 hour saying, come, sit down, tell me, did he make you wear it? Did he make you wear it? Did he make you wear it? I was like, no. I said, look, I'm British, I'm a foreigner. I said, I'm going to be killed. And he, every day, for 1 hour a day, he tried to break me. It was like an interrogation. And I kept saying to him, look, you don't understand. I said, this is not what it looks like. So these are the sort of experiences that I've had. And I always, like I said, try and find, turn things on their head. That's how I look at the world. And the other quick thing I want to tell you, which this is just no experience I've ever really known, to be honest with you. I've travelled a lot to conflict zones, but Iraq absolutely terrified me. And I am very happy to admit that every second I was in Baghdad, I was scared for my life, scared for the life of my family. But what used to make me laugh every day was there was so much laughter in everyone's homes. And I used to be feeling very overwhelmed at just how much people would laugh. Like, for example, one day, my sister-in-law, at the time she was 16, and we were having a little chat. And I said to her, look, I said, you do know that people don't really agree with this war? She was like, yes, yes. And I said, you know, a lot of these soldiers, right, I said, they don't want to be here. I said, it's a fact. I said, a lot of them are Hispanics, they're blacks, they're people that don't have a lot in their own country. And I said, some of them are here because they want to finish their university education. She was like, yes, yes. She said, don't worry, don't worry. She said, we watched Dr. Phil. And I thought, oh my God, I thought, not only have you occupied this country, destroyed the powerhouse of the Middle East, right, the place in the world where so much history and so much has come for the rest of us, and then you've gone and thrown your crap culture at them. She was like, Dr. Phil. I was like, oh dear God, right? And then another night, they were like, put the television on English channel, let her watch English channel. So they put the TV on for me, and there was a program about grave worshippers, Gothics. And I was just completely, I was like, these people are traumatized, right? And then they're heaping all this stuff on them. And my sister-in-law was like, these people worship graves? They worship graves? And I was like, so basically I was having to sell British PLC to the Iraqis. So I was having to sort of, tell them the truth about our country. So it was really amusing. And I'm just going to wrap up on this one point. In my stand-up, I talk about being married to an immigrant. Okay, because when we decided to get married, we got married in Jordan in the Middle East. And this is true, I went to the registry office in Oxford to obviously let the authorities know I was marrying the Iraqi. It was after 7/7, so it was a lot of fun, as you can imagine. And this absolutely happened to me. The woman took one look at me, she handed me a leaflet, and I said to her, what's this? It was about forced marriages. Right, I was 29 when I got married. I had to sit her down. I said, look, love, can you sit down, please? I said, look, I'm 29. I said, my mum and dad think I'm a lesbian. Right, I said, no one can force me. I said, he's Iraqi. I said, I'm Pakistani. I said, this is the type of match made in Guantanamo. You can't force this to happen. So she was like, oh, and she was like making notes. She's like, but you do understand why? I said, no, look. I said, you can't just go around treating everyone equally like this. You have to look for the signs. I said, do I look oppressed to you? So I ended up having this big discussion with her, and I had to give her counselling. She got the chocolate biscuits out, and then when he was sitting for his exam for the British when the immigrants citizenship test. In my stand-up, I turned things on their head. So I said that before my husband sat his citizenship test, we spent hours and hours watching television to acquaint him to life here in the UK. I've been subjected to hours and hours of bloody Jeremy Kyle. Now, quite frankly, if that programme isn't an advert for Islamic law, for Sharia law, I really don't know what is. After a decade of us Muslims being portrayed as terrorists, wife beaters, social security scamming scumbags, and worst of all, being depicted as a bunch of Datsun drivers, along comes this programme that shows some white British people as being a bunch of verbally challenged bed hoppers. Now, a bit like Jay-Z, we Muslims have got 99 problems, but a paternity test ain't one of them. Now, I was just going to one other quick thing. I did say I was going to wrap up, but what I wanted to say is breaking taboos and stereotypes, yeah? I think you asked me to quickly make a reference to that. Now, as I said to you earlier on, I don't go around walking through the streets of Manchester going, I'm breaking a stereotype, I'm breaking a taboo. No, I'm being myself. But even if I don't want to acknowledge this, I am forced every day to acknowledge that by my presence, by doing what I'm doing, that is actually what is happening. Like I said, I don't wake up in the morning going, damn it, I'm going to break another taboo. And it can be very exhausting, and it can, like I said to you earlier on, it has chipped away at my confidence, and I have been thinking, do I really want to do this? Because what happens to me is people come up to me and they actually say this to me. They're like, "You're all right for a Muslim," and it's like, and I said, it's like saying to a blonde woman, "You've got a brain." It's like, how dare you? How dare you say that to me? If you want to think it, but don't say it to me because I'm not interested. But over the period of the last year, it has been draining and exhilarating and wonderful, the whole stand-up experience. But it has really made me, as I said, work out if I really want to do it. And last month, I just thought, I really can't be bothered to do this anymore. But then after Oslo and everything, I thought, no, I have to do it. So I'm going to keep doing it. But the point here is that it's not easy to break stereotypes or taboos. But sometimes, well, every time, I think you just have to do it. You just have to do it. You've got no choice. We're living in very dangerous times. I've travelled extensively around the world. All these countries in the war on terror, I've been to every single one of them, including Iran. So, my passport looks like a proper axis of evil, right? It does. I always get stopped. I get, it's all people. Like when I go to Egypt, every single time they stop me because they hate Iran and they flick through my passport and they always say to me, "What is your nationality?" And I'm like, "I'm British." And then they're like, "What is your real nationality?" And with me, I'm a very difficult character. If you want to ask me something, if you've got prejudice in your head, if you want to convey your prejudice to me, you have to be blunt because I am not going to pretend I understand you. So I make them be extremely, extremely in my face with their prejudice, and only then will I acknowledge it and will I address it, because prior to that, I don't understand what they're talking about, right? So they're like, "What is your nationality?" I said, "British." "What is your real nationality?" "British." "Before you were British, what were you?" I said, "An embryo." So I said, and they were like, ballistic. "Your father, what about your father?" I said, "What about my father?" "What nationality is he?" "British." "Before he was British, he's British." So this went on for about 25 minutes. And basically what they wanted me to tell them was, am I a Sunni or a Shia? And I'm like, if you want to ask me that question, you are a troublemaker, you have something in your head, and I refuse to answer your questions. So that's why I have a lot of fun at these immigration counters. In my own country, no problem. But when I go traveling around the Middle East, they always ask me this question. In the end, the guy was so annoyed with me, just threw my passport back at me. I was like, bye. When I arrive at Heathrow, I want them to stop me because I'm nervous and anxious why no one stops me. "Where have you been, madam?" "Baghdad." "Great, goodbye." Right, so again, it's like turning things on their head. So anyway, I think I've witted on for long enough, so I shall leave you with that, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.